Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to the Study Circles of Muhammad Al-Masri YouTube channel. We have done a number of videos, and today we have come across a video which is of quite significance. It's titled Gaza and the Fall of the House of Saud with Abdullah Al Oudhs. So the son of the famous scholar from Saudi, Salman Al Oudhs, who is currently in captivity in the degenerate Al Saud regime. We pray Allah hastens his release. The video was filmed with the Thinking Muslim, who produce excellent content, mashallah. And we will put the link to the video. What's interesting about the video is it covered a lot of critical issues, everything from Gaza, colonization, Trump and his relationship with MBS, normalization. There is quite a lot of fertile ground for us to cover on this video. And we thought it's quite apt that we have Professor Muhammad Al-Masri, who is one of the leading Saudi dissidents and quite an authority on the subject of Saudi and very well known in Saudi and in the Middle East in general. The Arabic-speaking audience is significantly larger than the Western audience. So he is very well known and very notorious as well. For not holding back and critiquing these governments. What's interesting about this particular individual, which we'll delve into further, is he unfortunately he does have some kind of an inkling towards a more of a secular frame, which is why I'm quite surprised that Thinking Muslim did take him on, because I'd have thought that having an Islamist type of background, they would be aware of this. But there you go, because they're not necessarily authorities on the subject of Saudi, as opposed to yourself. This, it's best what they can probably have come up with. However, it is certainly a lot of good content there. So we're going to be playing segments from the video and inviting Professor Muhammad Al-Masri to comment on them and to expand on and give some more detail, because you are aware with what's happening there, what's on the ground, and the various currents, because he also covers issues like Wahabism as well. And you yourself, you don't shy away from any complex subject. And certainly, I'm sure you can provide much greater insight onto these subjects than probably most people can. So I've skipped forward to about 2 minutes, 31 seconds in, and that's where the kind of conversation starts, and I'll play it now.
Process with Saudi Arabia.
Well, let's go back to one specific moment in history, which is when son-in-law of Trump, like prior to his first term, got to know the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And if you go to that interview that Jared Kushner did, it's actually a podcast in which he laid down in details that relationship between him and Mohammed bin Salman. And he said somebody from Mohammed bin Salman's team by the name of Fahd al-Tunisi, he's an economist, by the way, approached Jared Kushner. And in that, communication, they said Mohammed bin Salman is somebody who is looking forward to a great relationship with the US, and he's willing to do a lot of reforms, and will look into files that have not been looked at before. And I think I want to underline this. And then, so Jared Kushner said, well, we have on the top of the agenda three files. One is the file of Islamic Madrasa / Wahabism. The second file is treatment of women. And the third and most important file of all is the situation of Israel in the region. So Fahd al-Tunisi responded back, and he said, well, we are a few steps ahead. We have already written a proposal, and we'll send it your way and see how it looks. So they sent a proposal for of course, top of the agenda, the relationship to Israel, and Mohammed bin Salman and Fahd al-Tunisi in that secret document that actually Jared Kushner just talked about, laid down the map and pathway to normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And he said Israel should be treated as a normal player in the region, and Saudi Arabia is going to be able to help toward that goal. So I want to remind you, this all happened before Mohammed bin Salman even became crown prince. If you wonder about the relationship of Mohammed bin Salman and the power and why Trump put like their weight behind this guy, and if you look at the Bob Woodward, biography that he did for Trump about Trump, Trump said about Mohammed bin Salman, we put our guy in power, meaning Mohammed bin Salman in power. Also, he said we saved his, we saved him. I think that's the safest way to describe the vulgarity of his phrasing toward that. Speaking about Mohammed bin Salman, right after Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist who was killed and dismembered at the Saudi consulate, the Saudi journalist who was killed and dismembered at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October 2nd, 2018. So part of why Trump put all that, just to answer your question, put all his weight behind Mohammed bin Salman, why they weathered the storm during the Khashoggi, why they saved him, why they put everything behind him, is to basically pay his part of the price, to fulfill his part of the deal, which is you come to power, we'll support you as crown prince, removing former crown prince Mohammed bin Nayef from power, making you the sheriff of town, making you the head of power. In your turn, you're going to do certain things, but on the top of the agenda is normalize with Israel. And of course, have this huge transaction deals with the US in terms of arms sales and, and you name it. So if you look at the context of all what happened, and how Mohammed bin Salman came to power, and this relationship to Jared Kushner, the normalization is just an expected, anticipated result of this sick relationship with Jared Kushner, the US, the Trump administration, and the West in general. Mohammed bin Salman came to power like a large, I would say, if I'm going to be really fair, a large portion of why he came to power is basically to fulfill this promise, at least the promise that he made to Jared Kushner, that he's going to normalize with Israel and make it easier for Israel to be a normal actor in the region.
That's really interesting.
Okay. Any comment?
Let me go a little bit deeper in history, because this is quite shallow history and also not accurate. The current Saudi state is actually not, the more accurate name will be called it Azizi state, Abdul Aziz state, Abdul Aziz Al Saud state. It's not Al Saud state. The first Saudi state was established in the 18th century, let's say 1750, roughly. It was before that, but roughly. That's where it really became clearly well established and conquered the main part of land of Najd, and then was able to encroach into the eastern region of Arabia, which has the classical Islamic name Bahrain. It's not a Bahkarat Bahrain. That's a tiny, irrelevant island. The whole east was called Bahrain, all the way to near the Emirate. And the Emirate and so on is a part of Oman. It's called the coastal area of Oman. And then extended there, and that's the first Saudi state. And then there was conflicts related to issue of Wahabism and then killing the Haji, because they were declared by the Wahhabi movements to be mushrik and idol worshipper. They're not allowed to come near to the holy sanctuary. And especially the Egyptian campaign was prevented from, because they usually having the dressing of the Kaaba coming from Egypt. It's continuing until very recently, by the way, etc. And they prevented them. There was a confrontation with bloodshed. And then the Muslim in India, which was at that time firmly in the hand of the East India Company, essentially Britain, approached the East India Company and the British Empire at that time, that you are our ruler, and we are obedient, you are submissive to you. We cannot give you obedience if you don't guarantee for us that we can at least make Hajj and Umrah. So make the way safe. At the time, Britain was not really that deep controlling in Arabia and the surrounding area. So they worked together with the Khilafah Uthmaniyya to solve this problem. And the Khalifa was also interested because people said, what are you doing? You are supposed to be the ruler of the two holy sanctuary, and you are doing nothing, etc., etc. He was the ruler of all sanctuary because of course was in his hand. So he ordered Muhammad Ali Pasha in Egypt to do the job. He sent his son Tucson. Tucson was a wimp, did not do very much. Then he sent his eldest son Ibrahim Pasha, and this one succeeded in finishing the first Saudi state. I think 1818 or 1820, around that. So the ruler at the time, Abdullah ibn Saud ibn Abdul Aziz ibn Muhammad ibn Saud, was detained and sent to Istanbul, to Turkey, to the Ottoman state, and was decapitated there as a rebellious, as involved in sedition, etc. Was killed, and some of Saud were kept there for 2 centuries. And some of the Mashaykh of Al-Sheikh and so on were taken to Egypt in imprisonment and so on. And the first Saudi state was gone. Turkey bin Abdullah bin Muhammad Saud, another branch, not the main branch of Abdul Aziz Muhammad Saud, escaped in the mountains near our village in Najd Hota, barricaded himself there, and even his son Jalawi, this is the branch was called Al-Jalawi. Jalawi means the one born in exile. The exiled one was born there in exile. Was able to go back and at least control part of Najd. And then he was assassinated. His son Faisal bin Turki bin Abdullah became then the Pasha, and the power constellation in the world and so on dictated that he should give bay'ah to Khilafah Uthmaniyya. So he was appointed by the Khalifa nominally as a Pasha of Najd. So the Khilafah was not interested in the headache, and actually we could say the Khilafah at that time, like 1850, now we are 1 century later, was essentially gone. What was there is just a shadow of itself, and the real rule was in the hand of the Young Turks and the Turanic Association. These are people who are extreme nationalists, importing nationalism from Europe, because Europe at that time was infested with nationalism, German nationalism, French nationalism, British to a lesser extent, etc., was really infested. So it was the fashion all over the world to be nationalistic, supremacy. We are the true race, we are the supreme race. Even after the theory of evolution was widely spread, they were thinking that in Europe that they are descending from orangutan, while the other human beings of Africa are descending from gorillas, things like that. It was grotesque, the racism. So these Turanic people were not interested in Arabia, but there is a power area, and as a prime minister and really the effective force inside Turkey, you would keep your empire as much as you can. So they kept that. So first of all, Turkey was doing that 1850 until almost 1900, before 1900. He passed away, I don't know the exact date, maybe 1880, 1885, and his sons disputed about who will be the rulers. Saud bin Faisal bin Turkey, Abdullah bin Faisal, Muhammad bin Faisal bin Turkey. Saud, and they have appointed as a ruler of Hail, the northern part of Najd. It's actually not Najd, it's more like closer to Sham, which is the city of Hail and the mountains of Aja and Salma. Even geologically is different. It's part of the Arabian Shield. It's not a sedimentary area. They appointed Ibn Rashid, who was a tribal chieftain for his generation before that. Like Al Saud is actually a deeper, well-established tribal chieftain, much earlier. Appointed him a ruler there. And then in the dispute, Abdullah and Muhammad joined Ibn Rashid. And he was able to expel Saud after long fights and so on out of Riyadh, ultimately. And Saud cooperated with the British secretly, not publicly, and even got fatwa from the Mashaykh to the level of intellectual and political understanding of the scholars of Najd at the time, how low they scooped. He was able to get fatwa from them that his brothers, Abdullah bin Faisal bin Turkey, Muhammad Faisal bin Turkey, are murtad and kafir because they are cooperating with the mushrik Rum, the Turks. So the Turks are mushrik, while he's cooperating with the British, but he's keeping that secret. So that passed, and the whole kingdom collapsed, or whole state collapsed and disappeared, and Abdul Aziz's father, Abdul Rahman and Abdul Aziz, as a boy, they escaped Riyadh and they went to Qatar for a certain time. That's the reason of the hostility. Somehow they have a conflict there with the Qatari ruling family, which are still ruling now, Al Thani. And then they were out to Bahrain for a short time, then to Kuwait. So Al Saud, the theater was closed, the curtain is closed, no more Saudi state. Now, toward the end of the 19th century, it was very clear after the Versailles Treaty and Bismarck subduing France and unifying Germany, the British Empire recognized that Germany is the real rising power. And they are a threat now for the British Empire. They will take over the empire if they left alone. But the British, as usual, cunning and slow in organizing and thinking, started thinking what to do now. For historic development of reason, Allah knows best how they complicatedly work together. Most these extreme Turkic nationalists, the Turanic Association, the Trans-Ural Association, and so on, they were educated in Germany. They were German educated, German speaker, and they have deep connection even with Germany. And also they imported this German nationalism and racism, but gave it a Turkish color. So they were very close to Germany, and this was a real danger, because even if the Ottoman state is the sick man of Europe, but still an important power, controlling vast, important area. Some of these areas control the way to India. Indeed, Britain was able to take Egypt and separate it away from that a few decades before, but the future looks bleak. There will be war in Europe. Germany will be the prime enemy, and almost certainly these Turanic extremists, these Turkish nationalists or fascists, they will cooperate with Germany. And that's what really happened. So we have to work on that now. And they start working. Around the turn of the past century, 1899, 1890, 1900, etc., they firmed their control on the Gulf. They established Al-Sabah as agent. Mubarakak As-Sabah as their agent, established him in Kuwait. They have also a relation with the Arabs in the other side, which is now part of Iran. That is called Ahwaz or Ahwaz. People sometimes pronounce it as Ahwaz. It's actually Ahwaz. And they firmed their control there, but that's only in the sea coast. Deep in Najd, Ibn Rashid is devoted to the Khilafah Uthmaniyya for whatever reason, maybe religious reason, maybe just political reason, we don't know. Most likely because they regarded this an Islamic entity, will never be cooperating with the Kuffar, the British, against them. So they were looking for someone who will be able in due course to establish Khilafah Uthmaniyya in the back. Which candidate they have? Obviously, the British, they know the nature of nations and know how to do things sneakingly and step by step. They are not a cowboy like the American, nor full of themselves as la grande nation. Maybe internally they, but they don't express that like the French la grande nation, boasting about empty boasts and so on. They definitely believe that they are a supreme race and a supreme country, but they work cautiously. So the best candidate would be someone from Al Saud, because Al Saud has they have a well-established kingdom and ruling in mid Najd for 1.5 centuries. Maybe they were enemy in the past, but it's long past, 100 years ago. Everyone has forgotten, and they are now gone. They couldn't send someone from the Gulf, the current Gulf, simply because he has no roots in Najd, and Najd is extremely Wahhabi, viciously Wahhabi. So they must send someone who has Wahhabi roots, even if he is personally not Wahhabi, even not, possibly non-Muslim, but he has to be. So Mubarakak As-Sabah suggested there's this young man, he's power greedy, he's like my son. That's how Mubarakak As-Sabah was addressing Abdul Aziz, addressing him as dear father, Al Aziz, and so on. This one will do the job. He will. So with British support and Kuwaiti support, he went 2 campaigns to Riyadh. The first one failed because Riyadh kicked him away. He made a mistake by taking, that's what the people of Riyadh told me orally, someone who remembers his father telling him that, because he was born around that time and Abdul entered. He said, I was talking about Abdul Aziz, how he entered Riyadh with 40 or 60 men and so on. And by trickery and intrigue, this man, one of the nobles of Riyadh, Saad bin Sa'id, told me, "You're stupid. You believe these stories they write in the history books. That's what in the history books. Nobody told us anything else. So I tell you what has happened. The first campaign, Abdul Aziz came with an army in which the British soldiers, obviously they're blonde, relative to the Arabs. Even if one of them is not blonde, he's for the Arabs red, Humran, red ones, and Rafat, Rafizi, Shia Rafidi from Kuwait, the biggest known in Najd. The moment he arrived in Riyadh, whatever circumstances they tell some people that Mubarakak As-Sabah was campaigning against Rashid and was defeated, or the people of Riyadh did not accept him anyway, they kicked him out or he ran away back to Kuwait. And Mubarakak As-Sabah told him, most likely, we don't have any record for the my son, did you lose your mind? You know your people in Riyadh, they're living in the darkest age of history. If they see a red man, they will be hyper. The adrenaline will be exploding. You don't go with red men, English, or Rafat, anyone smells like Kuwaiti. The dialect, the pronunciation will expose him. Get someone for your family and your slaves and your associate, and there are plenty of them. And go there and find a way to trick and enter. Because the governor of Riyadh, Ajlan, was appointed by Ibn Rashid, and he was married to the sister of Abdul Aziz, an older sister of Abdul Aziz. Find a way to trick and enter. There's no other way. And that's what he did. He entered by intrigue, by betrayal, and killed Ajlan while going to Fajr prayer, and declared himself not a king, but he announced on the minaret, kingdom belongs to Allah, then to Abdul Aziz. And the people accepted because he came to re-establish the Da'wah Salafiyya and to kick out Ibn Rashid and these people who school Aqidah and so on. That's the game he played. So this state is a British state, a British vassal state established using Abdul Aziz as a tool. Why they choose Abdul Aziz? Because nobody else there can be chosen, which have any history so that the people can be fooled and accept him. The only one who it could be of having any standing and some history is Al-Rashid and Al-Rashid and the Khilafah Uthmaniyya and refusing to cooperate with the British. And they defeated Mubarakak As-Sabah. So who is else there? There are other tribal chieftains, but they have no relation with the outside world. The tribal chieftain of Utayba, disconnect from the rest of the tribal chieftain of our tribe, the Dawasir, may be more powerful than Saud Merbo, than Al-Rashid, but he's disconnected from the world. All what they know is night and their camels and camel hairs. That's all what they know. They have no relation to the external world at all. There's no way you can use these and communicate with them, and will never accept the British agenda. It's very clear they will never. The only one who could is this one. So he did it. So this is the first Saudi state. They call the first Saudi state is actually the first Azizi state. It's not a Saudi state. Now, things developed. Britain's planning and pre-planning and looking forward turned out to be correct. The main enemy developed to be Germany, and the First World War erupted. In that time, Abdul Aziz approached the Khilafah Uthmaniyya and got the title of Pasha, exactly like his grandfather Faisal. Because Abdul Aziz is the son of Abdul Rahman, the son of Faisal bin Turki. So who is the Pasha of Najd? Nominally, he belongs to Khilafah Uthmaniyya. Nominally. But at that time, the relation between the Turks generally and Arab became extremely sour because these Turanic extremists, these Turkic fascists, they tried to do what's called the policy of turning everyone into the Turkish language. Started in the 19th century already. And this upset the Arabs. And the people were campaigning against that. And obviously imperial power, Britain, France, and so on, especially working in Lebanon and Syria and in Egypt, were inflaming the nationalism and the divisions and the tribalism. So Abdul Aziz and then the Sharif of Mecca, who tried to do some reforms inside, we have to admit that he tried to do reform inside the Khilafah Uthmaniyya, but he was out of time. History has run its course. There is no way to save this Khilafah, which is a nominal Khilafah anyway. That will be upsetting to Hizb ut-Tahrir, obviously, but it's just a name. It is a dead body. It's a stinking body. So he declared the Arabic Revolution, mid in the First World War, and rebellion against the Uthmani. And he fired the first shot, killing one Uthmani soldier in the fortification which was erected in Mecca to protect the Kaaba and so on. It's very painful to see that Sharif of Mecca from the house of the Prophet shooting another Muslim who was supposed to be guarding a Kaaba. But that's how things have become messed up over the centuries. And Abdul Aziz was jubilant because he pretended to be with the Arab nationalism. Most likely, he doesn't care about Arab nationalism. He doesn't care about anything else like that, but this is just to get more power. He's clearly a man of power, nothing else. And during the First World War, or First European War, actually, it's more like European War than World War, he made the so-called Darien or Qatif Treaty, in which he accepted to be under British protectorate. There was no formal protectorate status formalized by the League of Nations. The League of Nations came after the First World War, but essentially the same rules which are enshrined there, the British have developed before, but they're developing that over decades and centuries. And all these things go back to Versailles, and all these developments go back to the Treaty of Westphalia. So this is a continuous development in Europe, which was rising and increasing and so on, and reached its peak in the 19th century. So he accepted, and one of the conditions is that he doesn't appoint any successor or anything except someone who the British Empire approves and someone who is friendly to the empire, and he has to get the empire permission before appointing anybody. And he took a covenant that he does not touch the British vassals in the Gulf. They are off limit. He cannot even touch them and come close to them. And many other birds. That was kept secret, although it leaked, and some people criticized it at that time. But it was not really on the big bell. But the majority of people did not know about it. We know how things developed. The Turkish fascists declared war in behalf of the Khilafah together with Germany. Although the Khalifa himself, he was a shadow of himself, refused. What do we have with these wars between the kuffar? Let them fight each other. But the prime minister, a fascist, a Turkish non-Muslim Turkish fascist, insisted, and they joined Germany. And when Germany collapsed, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed at the end of the First War, and then the Khilafah Uthmani also collapsed. So all these old empires are gone. The only one old empire who survived is essentially the British and the French, which was now was essentially in the final imperial dissolution phase. And a major part of the victory is due to America entering the war and supporting them. But after the war, the Americans decided, were disgusted about the politics, and they felt that they should not be involved in the old world, should concentrate on the new world, and they went back. That's what. Even they sent a commission which studied the issue of Palestine and the Jews and so on. They studied Palestine, and the commission came with a conclusion, and the report is still there. It can be had. I think Yasser Qadi has a video about that. The report said any attempt to settle any group of people, Jews or otherwise, in Palestine will destabilize the area, will infringe on the rights of the people, and cause problems which will never end. The report is very clear, and that was the American policy. So they went back into isolation. The British Empire continued managing the world. In that time, 20s and 30s, in the 20s, British was running the world according to their desire, because it was the only power which survived cleanly, because the French were hammered nicely by the German, and the land was occupied, and so on. So they could not really file that much of demands, although they have some demands in Syces Picot. And also the Russian will participate in Syces Picot. That's where the Syces Picot document itself was leaked. It was leaked by the Bolsheviki when they won the revolution there. Otherwise, nobody would have known about Syces Picot. But they could not enforce much of it. So the British were managing arrogantly everything, even to the level that they wanted to. The Russians are gone, so they can't, because the share of the Russian would have been Istanbul and Anatolia. But the Russians are gone, so they can negotiate with Kemal Ataturk some deal there. They wanted also to put their hand on Syria. Syria, according to Syces Picot, belongs to France. Nevertheless, the British appointed King Faisal, the later Faisal of Iraq, not the Faisal of Saudi Arabia, appointed him king of Syria. They took liberties. The French said, no way. We are not happy with just having only Lebanon. So they encroached and kicked that king out. And he was kicked out and was going around in Europe complaining about his bad luck, and the British forsaken him, etc., etc. And the British said, okay, we have to shut up this guy, give him Iraq. So they're giving countries as if it belonged to their grandfather. In that time, early 20s, Abdul Aziz had control over Najd and the eastern region. Bahrain in the classical name, except obviously the British occupied area and the vassals. توش are Kuwait, Bahrain, current small Bahrain, island of Bahrain, Al-Thani, and the coast of Oman, the Emirates, these Mashaykh. Otherwise, he has free hand in Najd. Britain is not interested in that. And they've started yearly exploring oil in the eastern region and in Najd and so on. They didn't find anything. Then there's a confrontation between them and the Sharif of Mecca, because they promised the Sharif of Mecca to establish a Khilafah, an Arabic Khilafah. The Arabic Khilafah will contain all the Arab Peninsula, Iraq, Syria, up to the border of Turkey, of Anadolu. Obviously, no way they are going to fulfill that. So the Sharif felt that he is betrayed. But his sons, Faisal, the one who became king of Syria, kicked out and the king of Iraq, and then his grandson was then killed in the revolution of 1958 and pulled with his legs in the street, and the whole family was annihilated, that one. And Abdullah, the grandfather of this Abdullah. These two decided to join the British. And they are very close friends to Lawrence. There are even stories that they have homosexual relation, but that doesn't concern us. What they do in their bedroom, what they do in the public policy, the most important thing. So Abdullah was given East Jordan, which was at the time of Khilafah Uthmani, not even a sub-state, not even a state or wilaya. It was just essentially a caravan station with few villages and Bedouins. That's it. They carved him a country, kingdom. It was first called Emirate, and then they became a kingdom later under Abdullah. So these have sell out. The Sharif of Mecca stayed with his son Ali in Minha and kept them hammering the British with his demand, accused him of betrayal, tried to rally the Arab world and the Muslim world against them until he became, and he has a heavy weight, spiritual heavy weight. He's of the house of the Prophet, and that's well established. The family of the Sharif were ruling Mecca even before the Khilafah Uthmaniyya, in behalf of the Fatimi, in behalf of everyone. They were the ruler there. Nobody dared removing them. Now, what to do with this guy? So the British give green light to Abdul Aziz to storm Hijaz and take it. If you can't take it, take it. Just relieve us from this guy. This guy is making too much headache. We are busy now preparing how we can control Germany and subdue it and drain its resources by the sanctions and the reparations and things like that. And then clearly later was clear that the forces in Germany would rally against Britain. So they were preparing for eventuality. So Abdul Aziz was giving the green light to take Hijaz. And that's what he did. That's what he did. Now, inside Najd, conflict started to rising between him and the tribal chieftains. Tribal chieftains noticed this man is not for the da'wah. Despite their simple-mindedness and primitive level of thinking, at least this issue of allying with the kuffar was clear in their mind. And they were starting to doubt. The doubt also, the titles he gave to himself. For example, when he took Hijaz, what was his official title? There was no Saudi Arabia at that time. What was his title? Was Malik al-Hijaz wa Sultan Najd. The Sultan of Najd and its additional areas, plus the King of Hijaz. So when there was a confrontation which developed further until the year 1927, there was a conference in Najd when they criticized Abdul Aziz publicly. So there was public criticism and there were conference. People were gathering in thousands. It was like Bedouin and tribal democracy. And Abdul Aziz had a Mashaykh on his side, but not unconditionally. They have various questions. One of them, some of them are simple-minded, like what is about this telegraph? Is it legitimate or not legitimate? That shows the low level of civilization where the whole Muslim world have sunk. But there are other valid questions, like say, as far as we know, we gave you bay'ah as an imam, as a head of state, as a leader of the believers. Now we have this title, Sultan Najd wal Haqat, as a Sultan of Najd. The word Sultan is neutral. Okay, Sultan, maybe Sultan could be substituted for imam. Okay, but what is Malik al-Hijaz? Where this Malik came from? King, where does it come from? That's not a bay'ah. We gave you bay'ah as an imam of da'wah, not as a king. The first Saudi state, all the heads of state were imam. None of them was the king. Although practically it was a hereditary monarchy, but was never run. It was based on bay'ah. Where does that come? That's one of the questions. And many other questions similarly. And the relation with the English. They said, international, we cannot do anything. So, okay, let us now go to Iraq ourselves and we'll fight on our own. So, yeah, there's simple-mindedness. You don't fight against the British in Iraq while your back is open to Abdul Aziz. But they were so simple-minded and gullible, they thought Abdul Aziz will just let him go and do nothing. But that cannot happen. Because the British told them, you have to restrain the people. Say, I can't. Do something. So they attacked the tribal armies going towards Iraq with aeroplanes, and Abdul Aziz finished them from the back and detained their leadership. So that's the last time some kind of a popular accountability, democracy, even in a very primitive form, was in. Based on that, after he defeated the Ikhwan man Ta'a Allah, they called themselves the brothers of those who obey Allah. Ikhwan man Ta'a Allah, not Ikhwan Muslimin, Ikhwan man Ta'a Allah. So Ikhwan man Ta'a Allah, the leadership was detained in prison or killed, and they were scattered. But they were still plotting, some of them. I met some of them in the 60s. They were still thinking how they can assassinate the king and so on. Until that time, even 40 years later, they never gave up. But without leadership, you cannot do anything. You need to organize the action. He went to the Mashaykh and told them, listen, these tribal people, they claim they're doing commanding good and forbidding evil. The same, there are few parties in Hujjaj which were established under the Khilafah Uthmani and the Uthmani law of parties and so on, and they're working. We have to find a solution for that. This will split the ummah and cause confusion and possible sedition. So they issued a fatwa. He cunningly told them, commanding good and forbidding evil should not be given to these ignorant guys or those political association Hijaz. Should be in the hand of you, the Mashaykh. You are the one who can do it best. So he established Hayat al-Amr Ma'ruf and Nahy al-Munkar, the organization for commanding virtue and forbidding evil, under their leadership. They appoint the leader, they appoint everyone. And he gives the budget if there's budget available. But they have the Mashaykh and the leader al-Sheikh, they were quite rich, they can finance themselves. And got a fatwa that these parties are firaq, divisions, and heresy, bid'ah, and should be abolished. And he starts prosecuting the party, the real dangerous parties in Hijaz, and dissolved them. And the leader, some of them ran away to Egypt, stayed there for several years, like Muhammad Sabban, who became later the first Secretary General of the Muslim League, and became a finance minister and so on. Very, very sharp man and so on. He stayed there in Egypt 10 years, then he recognized the course of history is going in another direction, and he gave up and came and cooperated with the regime. Like many opposition everywhere in the world, the regime will buy them or tell them, if you want to really reform, so doing anything, you have to work on the other wing. And he came back and worked with them and became billionaire and so on. We don't want to discuss the man. He maybe has his own point of view and his ijtihad, we don't know. Allah. And others. And the tribes were dissolved. They did everything possible to dissolve them, weaken them, divide them, subdivide them, and so on. Because this tribal association is based on the genealogy and all association. Very difficult to dissolve. It's not like political party. If you strike them and do it properly, you may be able to dissolve them. So there was no movements, no parties, no organization, no unions. There were some unions established when Aramco established oil production in the eastern region to start with. Now they have the oil production in other various places. They, as American, they understand that the world doesn't work well, the world does not work without the unions. So they allowed unions. They have no problem with unions in the American mindset. But then these unions have demands and have demonstrations. And then Abdul Aziz got a fatwa from Mashaykh because they are naqabat, and they have some socialist slogans. You remember that's in the 50s, we're talking 1950s, and they are communists. Communist means atheist, mulhid, kafir, prohibition, and crackdown. So that's the stage that we have in the 50s. No parties, no organization. Abdul Aziz died in 1953, and so on. And the rulership went nominally to Saud, but the real powerful man is Faisal. That's the stage. No organization, no parties, nothing, but a little bit of political liberalism was there. I remember there were demonstrations when the triplet attack, that's Britain, France, and Israel attacked Egypt in 1956. There were demonstrations in Jeddah, I saw with myself against that. So that was still there. People could demonstrate and express their anger and things like that. in haphazard way. There was no laws prohibiting or allowing. It was going naturally. And that's the background of the situation which we have now in matter of Sahwa and so on. So now Abdul Aziz, on day one, one of the things which the British told him, your job is to control Najd and so on. And later they allowed him to go to Hujjaj, and that's it. And you don't even appoint a successor without our permission. And you are under our protection. That protection has been removed nominally in 1927. King George V, before he died in his last years, sent a letter to Abdul Aziz that we have cancelled this treaty, but we reserve the right to interfere if you don't abolish slavery. So he keep, as usual, the British way, keep a second key in the pocket, so he can interfere in the affairs if necessary. But the treaty was abolished, and then Saudi Arabia was allowed to rename itself into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 1933. But all in all, he's limited to Arabia. He should not have any international aspiration or any international aspiration. He should be under British order and command. To the tune that in the 30s, when the Palestinians were fed up with the immigration policy of the British, opening the doors for the Jews to come into to Palestine. That's, by the way, well before the Holocaust. So that's an old British policy. Holocaust is just used for propaganda. It's irrelevant. Actually, the Zionist organization are accused to be participating with the fascist Nazi in the Holocaust to force the Jews to go to Palestine. Anyway, that's not important for us. There was a revolution, and the revolution became considerable. So the British wanted someone to mediate for them. They cannot fight the people in street fights, number one. Secondly, they have to get all their forces and power directed towards Hitler and Germany. So what to do? They asked the Arab leaders who can mediate and so on. King Abdullah, I think at that time he was still a prince or something, an Amir, offered himself, say, you don't have any standing. Yeah, you are from Ahl al-Bayt, but nobody give you any respect. The only one who seems to be Islamically generally accepted is King Abdul Aziz, because he has the two holy sanctuary. Let him mediate. And he sent two of his sons, I think Faisal and Khalid, to pacify the Palestinians and give them a firm promise that the British Empire has promised us firmly that the immigration of the Jews, the admission of the Jews into Palestine will stop, which is not true. It never stopped. And he knows that it will never stop. Actually, his advisor, St. John's Philby, who became later Muslim, Allah, he's the real Muslim or not, we don't want to discuss that. That's not our issue. Reports to the charge d'affaires of the British Empire in Basra, as like a consul, that a report from Abdul Aziz. I'm not sure if it's a writing but this charge d'affaires was his name, Henderson, I think, in his memory book, Kuwait وجاراتها. He was in Kuwait and Basra. Kuwait وجاراتها, Kuwait and its neighbors, said Abdul Aziz urged me through Philby, that he told Philby, ask Henderson to approach his Majesty's government and pressurize them that they should stay in Palestine at least for 100 years. Otherwise, we will not get stability in the area. And that's on record. This is in writing. So, sell out. Accepting Israel is very long ago, but cannot be said publicly. Especially in Saudi Arabia at that time, it's impossible. Because in 1936, when the revolution in Palestine was at a peak, before he sent his sons, they came, I think, in 1937 or something like that, and they pacified, and the revolution stopped and told them, we have a firm promise it will be executed. Turns out, as usual, like usual, the British Empire promises are fake. In that time, what I was saying, yeah, and from that time, it's already Al Saud are in cohort with the British and accepting the Jewish immigration, or accepting or not accepting, they are ready for it. In 1936, because of the flame of this revolution, the Mashaykh, the scholars in Najd, called for a Mashaykh conference without Ali's permission. At the time, they didn't deal. They have sufficient power and they were sufficiently self-conscious to do that on their own. And in that they issued an extremely harsh fatwa that it's obligatory to annihilate the Jews, expel them out of Palestine, and anyone cooperating with them or the British in this regard is a kafir murtad and must be fought. So that's the public opinion. That's the scholarly opinion. And that's the public sentiment. So he has to pretend to be pro-Palestine and pro-Palestinian cause. He was never with the Palestinian cause. Never, ever. Even before, when some Palestinian delegation, when the beginning of the revolution and the rise against the British, like in the late 20s, I think 27 or 28, 1927, 28, there was a Palestinian delegation coming for Hajj, and he took liberty to accuse them and attack them and denigrate them because of their rebellion against the British. You're endangering peace, you're endangering our stability, you don't know what you are doing. Similar what the Saudis and the regime saying now. Exactly the same one. So it's not today. It's already 100 years ago. If someone tells you that Mohammed bin Salman said, no. This is a well-established family policy of Al Saud. They tell each other, educate each other orally about that. Give you an example. I was studying middle and high school, the 6 years, 3 and 3. In the school inside Nasriya. Nasriya is the palace of King Saud. That's one of his greatest weaknesses, that he loves palaces, and he established a whole area with walls called Nasriya. Inside Nasriya, there was a school called the Madrasat Anjar al-Malik Saud, the school for the children of King Saud. And there wasn't that school from the first medium, the last 6 years of middle and high school, because we have 6, 3, 3 in Saudi Arabia. Sometimes there were certain functions. We'll go, the school organizes a bus, and we go to the racing ground in Malaz, attend the function, and speeches and things like that. So in the way, people are bored and they sing. So the princes and their slaves, at the time they were still slaves, I think they were not freed, or they freed nominally later, is not important. Even after freeing nominally, they are still slaves with slave mentality. And they're khoya. Do you know what khoya means? Khoya is a plural of brother, the brothers. What are these brothers? The brothers are people from tribes, usually for the middle ranks, but sometimes from the children of the leadership of the tribe, but usually for the middle ranks or the lower ranks, which every prince is having a bunch of them. The smallest prince will have 10. One is a driver, one is a coffee maker, one is a guard on the door, and things like that. For a salary. So he can support his family. And then became mentally indoctrinated and trained to servitude to Al Saud. Besides the slaves, mostly black, but there are the white slaves from Georgia and so on, allegedly. So we are in the bus going to such a function, and we were singing, for there was a function for Palestine. So everyone was singing, Jina wa Jina lika Palestine. We are coming to help you, Palestine. The princes and the slaves, that's in the 60s. When I was in the school, it was from 57 until 63, before I went to Germany. What is their song? They changed the word Palestine into Falastis. What is this? Falastis. Falas means bankruptcy. And Tis meaning arse or ass. The bankrupt ass. Mutilating the name, the mentality. They didn't get it from heaven, nor from the public media. They get it from the royal palaces. That's the tradition of the Al Saud family. In between them, when they're together, they talk about Palestine, since ancient time. So keep that in your mind, in your background. That's what we are dealing with. I'm not dealing with Mohammed bin Salman, not even Mohammed bin Nayef. We're dealing with an old disease, with establishing of this entity called Saudi Arabia. They should have called Aziziyya or Mamlaka Al-Arabiyya Al-Aziziyya or something like that, not Saudiya. It's not even Saudiya, because only Abdul Aziz and his descent are the one who have access to power, even up to constitution enacted by Fahd. A king will be, bay'at or king will be given from the children of Abdul Aziz only. It's a Dawla Aziziyya, not Saudiya even, but independent of the naming. So this is the well-established sentiment inside the royal palaces, behind the walls. And it spills over from time to time in such occasions, like school kids of the age of like 13, 14 until 17, like myself at that time, in that span, going to a function of Palestine in the bus of the school and singing Jina wa Jina lika Palestine. We're coming to you, Palestine. And the Jina wa Jina lika Palestine. Who said that? The prince, his khoya, and his slaves. And at the time, we are too young to understand the deep meaning of that. Meaning that this family is deeply anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab, especially anti-Egyptian, because they still Remember that Egypt is the one demolished the first Saudi state, the first state, and the anti-Muslim. That's it, deep inside. Especially the Abdul Aziz, the branch, and the closer one. The far away branches may be a mix. Some of them pro-Islam, some of them anti-Islam, some pro-Arab, some anti-Arab. But that closer circle, that's the inner circle of power, has nothing to do with Islam or Arabism or Palestine since ancient time. If you have that in your mind, you know what's going on. But the historic situation did not permit much of things until it came possible to do that. Even the change from British sponsorship to American sponsorship to the end of the Second World War, when Abdul Aziz met with Roosevelt on board of the New Jersey, we don't know what has happened there, because he went there by invitation of Roosevelt, and his official translator, who became later the director of the Saudi Arabian Broadcasting Organization, was his official translator, was told to stay here because the American ambassador in Jeddah at that time was proficient in Arabic. So the American ambassador and King Abdul Aziz and Roosevelt, the three alone, were in a room. And what happened there is only memorized and recorded down in the minutes by the American ambassador, who his headmaster's was good Arabic speaker. Even his own translator was not permitted in. Now, this one have his memoirs, and he claimed that Abdul Aziz urged Roosevelt not to allow for the Jewish state in Palestine, because this was called instability and problem. Allahu Alam, is it true or not? Even if it is true, the motivation is not to love to the Palestinian. The motivation is that he knows, he's definitely politically seasoned and know such an entity will be destabilizing and will be shaking his throne. He doesn't want to select. And that's the reason he asked through Henderson, please, for the empire, stay there 100 years until everything is stable, and everything is developed properly, and so on, which the British obviously are not willing to do. They didn't do that there except to finish the Khilafah Uthmaniyya, and then they leave it to wilderness. And the issue of oil was not on the table. The British would not have given up so easily. So even with changing of the master from Britain to America did not change this deep seated policy. Definitely not. So that's the situation that we have. A regime there. When Sadat was willing to cooperate and won between quotes the artificial 1973 war, many people will be shocked when they hear the word artificial, especially Jalal and so on. Read the communication of Hizb ut-Tahrir at that time. He will tell you what the war is all about. The only one who saw what the war about is just a piece of theater to prepare for the acknowledging Israel and ending the confrontation with them is Sheikh Turki rahmatullah alayhi. He was still alive at that time. Anyway, when that happened, Fahd was majorly cooperating in that, but underground. And there are reports that he told Sadat, listen, you do Camp David, we'll help you with money and everything and support, but publicly we have to curse you and condemn you for some time. But don't worry, in due course we'll be back as loving friends. But for the moment we have to curse. And that's exactly what had happened. A couple of years later, after Camp David and so on, Fahd came with his Fahd proposal. Palestinian state for 1967, borders, and the two-state solution, which is the American solution, by the way, it's the old American solution. And theoretically still the old one. So that's a background about the issue with Palestine and the issue with America. Now, concerning the development, actually the real American agent, meaning the agent of the military-industrial complex, which is the dominant force in America. In America, we have two dominant forces. That also helps in the political analysis. I think Jalal, being for Hizb ut-Tahrir, should be able to understand that. Maybe other like Muslim Brotherhood are just simply too gullible and simple-minded analysis, if not even some of them are traitors. Some of the leaders, I mean, is that the main force is obviously the American nationalist and capitalist and military-industrial complex. And this one is also partly pro-Israel. Why? Because this having a considerable portion of the men and women there in time past was a majority, maybe in the 19th century, but with the continuous secularization and weakening of religion in America, they became minority, or the so-called evangelical Christian, the evangelical Zionists. By the way, when in the First World War, who was the prime minister, the one who was keen to control Palestine before the Christmas of 1917? George Lloyd. George Lloyd. You will remember George Lloyd. He was the leader of the Labour Party. Yes, he's the leader of the Labour Party in matter of day-to-day politics. But what is his belief? He's a Zionist Christian. He's a Zionist evangelical. Check his history. So, taking Palestine was for him a mandate of belief to accelerate the coming of Christ, exactly like Zionist Christian America. So we have this odd situation. So the military-industrial complex is Zionist because of belief, originally. And that facilitated the Zionist lobby to penetrate. But we have, since Britain has declined from the world power position, and they recognized already in the 60s, there's no way we can do politics independently. So why don't do the politics through our people who have sharing the same ideals and ideas inside America? What is this other faction or the main direction? Is the banking association, the finance powers, and so on, what we call the oligarchy. So we have the military industrial complex, the American nationalists, and we have the oligarchy. This oligarchy is essentially MI6 and Britain becoming a virus and infested America. And Britain as a public entity seems to be alive America and walking to its side. Obviously, from time to time, they stab them in the back if they can, but that's what the job for the oligarchy, for the old British aristocracy and the old bankers here, who are much older than America, I mean, as banks and as aristocracy, is already a faction in America. It's still not the dominant faction, but sometimes they get a little bit of overhand, sometimes less, and sometimes they fight between each other on secondary issues, and sometimes they cooperate. And thus we bring this confusing picture of America and American politics. People sometimes know what's happening. Trump changed the policy, Biden has another policy, this has this policy, and so on. I mean, internationally. Internally, they have their own point of view about LGBT, about these things. That's their internal problem. But if it comes to international, American dominance, American empire, they have sometimes disagreement about ways and means and tools. The main direction is given by a military-industrial complex and the American nationalists and the American patriots, they call it. They don't like the word nationalists, we are patriots. The American nation is first, America first. But Trump is neither from this nor for this. He's a populist and demagogue and an excellent actor. So he has to be understood this way. And a businessman, a man of dealing and wheeling and buying and selling. So that issue with that what Abdullah Al Oudhs is trying to represent, that it is the attempt to recognize Israel and settle with it, etc., is essentially Mohammed bin Salman. It smacks as if he want to a bit exonerate Mohammed bin Nayef. Mohammed bin Nayef is a prime American agent. He has even a medal, American medal, for someone who served the CIA best in the international arena. The same Mohammed bin Nayef, who used to be the Crown Prince, and he has, I think, until now, he's hung from his feet and being beaten and tortured by Mohammed bin Salman.
What a shame.
So all of them are Zionists, all of them pro-Israel. But the question, how to do it, how much publicity we can do, can we trust that the people are accepting that? Did we give them enough dancing and Shakira and so on so that they forget about Palestine? Or is only a minority which is not effective? Is still the majority dangerous? They will erupt in like a volcano in due course. And clearly, after 7th October until now, it shows they have the pulse on the people feeling, definitely. We don't have obvious statistics. We don't have real polls, reliable polls. They have some polls, but they're not reliable. But clearly, their own polls and their own intelligence service is telling them that people are about to erupt. That's what's happening in Palestine. So they have to step back and put a nice face for Palestine. They never liked Palestine, neither Mohammed bin Salman nor Mohammed bin Nayef. That's just a background, so you have some idea what's going on.
It's very helpful. I'm going to play some more, inshallah, because there's plenty of.
But just to clarify the background, it's not the guilt of Mohammed or non-guilt. The only thing that Mohammed bin Salman, being the youngest, maybe one of the younger children of King Salman, and being the son of a woman which is from the tribe of Al-Ajami, she Ajamiya. Ajami does not mean non-Arab, but the tribe called Al-Ujman. They're a very tough tribe. They're the only tribe who almost killed Abdul Aziz in Kanzan, in the Battle of Kanzan in the 20s of the last century. But unfortunately, his grandfather, the father of the wife of Salman, is a man of bad reputation. Just let's say it openly. He's a pimp for Salman. And because he's deeply involved in things and so on, and he has enough tribal support, he was able to persuade Salman to marry his daughter. And she's good looking, no doubt, but she's a very vicious lady, extremely vicious. And she is the mother of this one. And she is so vicious. One day they were doing holiday with Salman. I don't know if after he became king or before, they were doing holiday in France. And in the airport, he angered her with something. And the people who witnessed that say she screamed at him like a lioness in rage. He was unable to contain her. That's Al-Fahda Al-Ajamiyya. So he is from that, while the other, all the sons and so on, they believe they are higher rank because their mother is from Al-Saud, from Sudairi. Sudairi are the cousins and the uncles of Al-Saud. The mother of Abdul Aziz is Sudairi. And the mother of the Sudairi 7 is a Sudairi also. So Al-Sudairi are so close to Al-Saud, you cannot get closer. For someone who is not from Al-Saud and close, this is the Sudairi. So they regard themselves a higher rank than this Bedouin boy. And they were mistreating him. So he developed psychological problems and the treatment in Germany, but he seemed to have recovered, but he has done what they call egomania. And earlier, it was reported quite convincingly that he believes that he can compete with Alexander of Macedonian Alexander, and was insisting that his entourage call him Alexander. I think he has given that up. He matured a little bit behind that, just to know the psychology of the man. Now, what he did, maybe just quickly before we continue, what he did with the Ritz, but by smashing the power centers in Arabia, that's concerning because he wants to ensure that there is no one competing with him with the throne. Because he's the crown prince, but it's not automatic that he will become if there are any powerful guys around you. So most of them were detained, accused of corruption. He skimmed some of their money or all of their money, hung there from their feet, threatened them, mistreated them to extreme, to most likely on the advisor who are Western educated secular like Turki al-Hamid, because they told him no country which has like feudal lords and the power centers will progress. You have to have a strong central government like in Europe. Europe in the time of feudalism was unable to confront the Ottoman, or confront anybody. The only way to have a strong state which can confront its external enemy and expand if necessary and so on is to have a central power. Feudalism must go back. It becomes just titles, like in Britain, just nice title. Member of British Empire, commander of British Empire, just titles. You just play with the people, give them titles just for. But real power is gone. No. So he advised him this. In some sense, this is a good advice to make a strong state. The problem is that if you want to do that, you should have a state apparatus and deep state developed over decades and centuries. In Saudi Arabia, we don't have that. The only power was in time past was the tribal chieftains, and they were finished, and the various important princes of Al Saud and some business people closely associated with them. If you beat these up and hang there from their feet and skim their money, they lose their power. You have a central, but you don't have a deep state. You have an unstable system. The British system is not unstable; it's very stable because there's a deep state that goes deep in history, represented by the smoking clubs, represented by the kings or the queen's privy council, represented by the noble class, represented by the House of Lords, the appointed and the inheritary lords, represented by the church established by Henry VIII. All of that is a deep state, a deep structure, which is well established and regarded by the people as a fact of life, like the sun rising in the east every day. You don't have that in Saudi Arabia, so it's very unstable. very easy to remove the whole system. In time past, it was weakening the central power, but at least there are power centers which could manage a civil war or protect the Al Saud. Now it is only one. This one is taken out. The other ones that do not have any power left, and then things will become confusing and unstable. Now, just a remark about the power relation. So let's continue.
Yeah, he does actually say a lot of this before, maybe not as much detail.
Mhm.
Inshallah. Okay,